These programs, together with other intelligence, have protected the U.S. and our allies from terrorist threats across the globe, to include helping prevent the potential terrorist events over 50 times since 9/11.
NSA, utilizing 702 authority, was monitoring a known extremist in Yemen. This individual was in contact with an individual in the United States named Khalid Ouazani. Ouazani and other individuals that we identified through a FISA that the FBI applied for through the FISC were able to detect a nascent plotting to bomb the New York Stock Exchange.
Top government officials defending the NSA's controversial surveillance programs in Washington today. And as you just heard, NSA Director General Keith Alexander says the programs helped stop more than 50 terror acts. But it's not totally clear whether these types of sweeping surveillance programs are necessary to keep our country safe, and what kind of an impact could an attack on the New York Stock Exchange have on the economy. Joining me now is former NSA official Colonel Cedric Leighton. Welcome back to the show.
My pleasure, Melissa.
So on the positive side, you know, the reaction to today's hearing sort of across the board was that this certainly seemed more upfront, more professional, more prepared than sort of the parade of jokers that we saw coming out to talk about testifying on behalf of the IRS or any of the other hearings. This had a much more official, much more researched feel to it. Would you agree with that?
Oh, absolutely. And, you know, when you look at the relationship that NSA has had with the congressional oversight committees, such as the House committee where this hearing was today and the Senate Intelligence Committee, I tell you from my personal experience as well as what I saw today, it was absolutely the most professional hearing. It was very much to the point, got a lot of questions answered, and really was an example of how these kinds of activities can be examined through congressional oversight, and something that I think Americans hopefully are proud of at this point.
There were no sarcastic remarks, like when asked, why did you have to go to the White House, you know, 150 some odd times or whatever the number is. There's nothing about, you know, the Easter egg roll. On the flip side of that, though, you know, when they're sitting there and they're talking about having foiled 50 attacks, and you drill down on the details of what is actually being said, it was unclear to me from the testimony that this program was directly responsible, or I mean, for sure not solely responsible, for having those attacks not happen. At best, it seemed like in a lot of cases, it was a secondary source for some type of confirmation. Your thoughts on that?
Well, that may be true for many of the cases. I think that they're trying to be very cautious with how much success they ascribe to these two programs, the internet surveillance one and the one that deals with the phone numbers. So they have to be very cautious. And quite frankly, you know, Melissa, when you look at the way in which intelligence is pieced together, it is basically putting a jigsaw puzzle together. There are different pieces that have different sources. So if you think of the jigsaw puzzle as coming from different boxes, the different pieces coming from different boxes, that's how the intelligence is put together. And that's where one box may very well be part of these activities, but another box may just be an average citizen on the street noticing something and saying something about it.
But here is the problem for the average citizen out there. They are asked to have a tremendous amount of trust that the government is going to cast this very large net and they aren't going to abuse it, that they're going to collect this data and they're going to sit on it and only go back to it if they have a good reason to go back and look at it. On the flip side of it, you are hearing at the exact same time about you know, what happened to James Rosen, what happened to the AP, to the government abusing their authority to oversee and look in and get records from people. So we're seeing, you know, potentially abuse on one hand, and then on the other hand, we're being told we need this in order to be safe. What kind of case does the NSA have to make to the American public to make them feel better, do you think?
Well, I think they're beginning to make that case, but clearly there are, certainly timing was one of the worst possible in the history of these kinds of activities. But, you know, when you look at the James Rosen case and the AP case, those were other arms of government allegedly that did this, that were involved in this, and NSA very specifically, and I can tell you from my own personal experience, was not involved in any of those cases. So when you extend that argument, you have to look at the oversight mechanisms that are in place in all these different areas. And perhaps what government agencies need to do, other government agencies besides NSA, is take a look at how NSA does this kind of oversight and then use that as a model for their own internal oversight mechanisms. That might be a step in the right direction, because the NSA operates in a very apolitical, nonpartisan fashion, and that is precisely what is required of all these other entities in government.
It is, and it seems like, to the public that that's not what's going on. So to trust one agency to be nonpartisan when you've seen others that seem to, on the surface, from the evidence we've seen so far, have gone in the other direction, it's hard for the American public to say this one deserves my trust, this one doesn't. I don't know. It's an interesting discussion. We'll definitely be continuing. Colonel, thanks for coming on the show. We always appreciate your time.
My pleasure, Melissa.